Sheep tails. Now, I know you may be thinking it's not that deep, but the sheep tail iceberg is full of fun twists, turns, and icy crags. Hello, shepherds. Welcome back. And if you're new here, hello. This is where we talk all things sheepy. My name's Megan, and today we're taking a not-so-deep dive into the world of sheep tails and the international quest to breed naturally docked or tailless sheep. As always, I'll be mispronouncing several names and words, both common and uncommon, in short, speech impediment, and the sources are cited in the description. Okay, so if you're new to sheep, you may already be thinking that sheep have naturally short tails, or are already tailless. So why are we even talking about sheep tails? And that's all valid. There's a lot of hot takes as well as genuine misinformation out there on sheep tails. So I think that this is an important conversation that we can all have in a fun and nuanced and light way. So let's talk tails, the why, the how, and including practices that exist in the various regions. So sheep tails. There are four main groups of sheep tails that occur naturally. The short tails, the long tails, the fat tails, twisted, and then other, aka science experiment groups. Each of these groups have subtypes as well, especially the fat tail group. And maybe there's even a seventh group. I'll call it the docked group, which is probably the most common sheep tail group. So common that many people may mistake it as a natural tail. So let me hold your hand when I say this. That tail is not natural, bestie. If you give plastic surgery to someone or an animal, their offspring do not inherit that plastic surgery. Okay, joking aside, let's talk genetics. So what do sheep inherit then? When it comes to tails, sheep tails are highly heritable, with a heritability estimate for tail length somewhere between 0.63 to all the way to 0.68. So around above 60% inherited from their parents. So what that means is that above 60% is inherited from their parents, and the rest, which is less than 40%, is influenced by their environment. Then we also have breech and belly bareness, so hairiness or baldness, which also has a heritability I've seen from ranges anywhere from 0.3 to 0.5, which translates to 30 to 50% heritability from their parents. So that's a lot of variation depending on which source or article, but this is important for woolly people who want to move away from docking, and I'll get more into that later. A trait like dagginess or poopy butts have a pretty low heritability, about 0.2 or 20%. So environment plays a really big impact here. Okay, so let's start with tail types. The Northern European short-tailed breeds. There's over 30 breeds that fall into this group, from Icelandics, the Shetlands, the Finn sheeps, and more. They have a naturally short and thin tail. It's mostly woolless, and I've seen folks call this tail type a tailless breed, and they have tails. It's just that as their wool grows in, their tails tend to disappear under all that fluff. There's different shapes to their tails. Shetlands often have a fluke-shaped tail, so it starts wide and then tapers to this hairy point. I think it's adorable. The tails are short because they have less bones in their tails than longer tail breeds, and their bones themselves are also shorter. So we have 13 vertebrae in short tails compared to the 16 to almost 24 bones in longer tail breeds. Both for breed standards as well as practicality, we just don't dock or shorten the tail. It's all natural and pretty trouble-free. It's a low maintenance type of tail, and I love the expressiveness of a tail. It does perform a function of helping to spread their urine and poop away from their body, usually when they swish their tails. But overall, it's a pretty unassuming tail. I rate them 10 out of 10 tail wags for adorableness. In stark contrast to our short tail breeds, we have our long tail breeds. They can have woolly tails, hairy tails, or even a bald, scroggly tail. And this ewe is a crossbreed, and the long tail gene is pretty dominant. And even though her dam came docked, I don't follow suit and dock or mainly shorten the tails. When we get in close, you can see how her tail's covered with all these tiny hairs. Just like with the hair sheep, if they ever do get any poop on their tail, it dries fast, hard, and then it falls off. So it denies the flies a lovely place to set up shop and hurt our sheep. And even though she's technically a woolly breed, her tail's more like a hair sheep. We just don't have fly strike problems here that they have in other areas, and so it's unnecessary to dock. And plus, look at that stick of a tail. I rate it 12 wizard staffs because it's so magical. But if my ewe happens to throw a woolly tail, what would happen? If our little lamb here would happen to have a woolly tail, what happens is that the dags, so sometimes this happens to put crudely like skid marks on their wool, especially as their wool grows long and in the way of their poopies. So it's really important to give them a hygiene cut or crutching. But for her and our other sheep, especially prior to lambing and keeping their udder cleaner, I usually just give them a light trim around the rear area. But for woolly tails, it would involve more of shearing the tail. Because more often than not, the problem with woolly tails really occurs more in spring when there's that sudden spring surge of wet and lush grass. It's lower in fiber and higher in moisture, and it really tends to give sheep a little bit of a looser stool. It does help to give the flock some hay prior to turning them out, or to do some managed grazing to compensate for that really extra moisture. But also some illnesses and parasites can cause scouring, which also makes sheep or lambs more susceptible to fly strike as well. To combat this, it really helps to be on top of their health to prevent this domino effect in health problems. But this is where sheep can really get into trouble, especially in areas prone to fly strike. It's a pretty horrific problem if you've ever seen it in the wild. And if you have a larger flock or skittish sheep where the sheep can hide easier, maybe you can see where it can get out of hand pretty fast. To combat this problem in smaller flocks or where breed standard allows, it really helps to just cut and shear the wool off the tail, effectively creating a hair sheep tail. Shearing a long and woolly tail can be really tricky, and it's important to not nick or scratch the tail. And these flies are really dangerous. Even the scratch is an invitation for infection. So a layer of blue coat and a strict management practice as well as monitoring are really important to help prevent fly strike. Some countries have fly strike prevention treatments, but unfortunately it's not universally available to the global market. So we have tail docking, the controversial practice for a lot of larger operations. And for some breed standards, we have docking. Some practices that are perfect for a small scale one-man operation just are not practical on the scale of large sheep farms. And before you go any further, I want to make sure to be clear that this is a nuanced topic, and a lot of people get into sheep not because of the money, but because they're sheep people, not people. They genuinely love their breed, and they want the best for the sheep, regardless of endpoint, purpose, or role. People want their sheep to have a happy, pain-free, or best life. There are very real veterinary and welfare reasons why tail docking became standard practice in modern sheep farming. So most people that I met are familiar with docking as a breed standard, as well as a fly strike prevention. But docking also serves as a purpose with some fat tail sheep breeds. They'll go into fat tails later on, but for the purpose of docking, it helps the fat tail sheep from dragging their tails all on the ground and getting injured, and also help the sheep perform their reproductive jobs. So now that we talked about the faux tailless, maybe you're thinking to yourself, what about real tailless sheep? Why don't we just breed tailless sheep? There are some alternatives starting to gain traction, but before I move on, let's rate docking. I rate it 1 sheep fitting stand and conditioning shampoo with 2 sheepy blankets, with an adjustable sheep halter. The quest for tailless sheep. So back in the before times, so pre-2020, docking then, just like now, was used to prevent fly strike. As part of a hygiene management system, for some breeds, it also became the breed standard, and for some producers, it became a requirement. You can't send your sheep to market unless its tail is docked. So there are systems in place that are really slow to change or adapt to the various newer breeds and sheep developments. Some countries have minimum requirements to how to dock and the best method recommended for animals. These are all based on animal welfare research, and when it comes to docking, there are 2 main accepted methods: the rubber ring castration band method and a hot knife method. Each has its own benefits and downsides, but as I mentioned earlier, there have been a multi-decade quest to breed a tailless sheep. So let's get back to the turn of the century. No, not that one, the one before that. The year is 1913, and people wanted a docked sheep that's naturally tailless. So traveling far and wide, sheep scientists did discover a breed of sheep that carries the no-tail trait. Then bringing that sheep back to the hills and labs of South Dakota, the 50-year-long research began. Breeding, culling, and testing. By the time the study ended, this groundbreaking no-tail sheep breed ended in colossal failure. In short, just like how Manx cat breed can have several health problems associated with their spine, these sheep had so many problems. Imagine what these scientists had to go through, where they found out that there was a lethal gene combination. There was a very poor survival rate. What this means is that many of the tailless variety of lambs died in the womb, and not only that, and the ones that did make it all the way through to lambing ended up having their internal organs affected. Some organs were undeveloped, other ones were incompletely developed. Lambs were often born paralyzed. So, was there a limit to science? Are sheep meant to be tailless? Imagine trying for 50 years, and for what? The next country to try to tackle breeding tailless sheep was New Zealand. Many years have passed and we have better technology, so does it work? Well, we're still in the last century at this point, so 1970 and 1980s. And though the scientists did find out why the first study didn't work. Okay, so this is well above my pay grade, so I'm going to do my best. But so in previous videos, I've talked about color genetics, and so similarly, we're working with dominant alleles. But also there's a thing called ancestral allele and derived alleles. And I'm sure I'm messing this up, but basically they were using derived alleles, which is basically a mutation or a recent-ish variant, just like in dogs and cats. They're called deleterious mutations, and they can cause a lot of diseases, rather than the ancestral genetic variants like those with short-tail breeds, where they end up having viable offspring. Okay, so was this New Zealand researcher successful? They had a really short deadline to work in, so 10 years. It's not a lot of time for long-lived animals like sheep to do a study like this. So though they didn't succeed in creating a no-tail sheep breed, they did discover a lot that helped us better understand the genetics of sheep, which to me is still a win. But the quest for tailless sheep doesn't end there. Picking up the mantle, several other teams across many countries have continued through gene editing of the Pamir Agro breed of sheep from Mongolia, also known as the Marco Polo sheep. It has a short tail, and then there's also another team of researchers going the route of the Merino Lenschnaf lambs from Germany, and then there's also a third group of Australia tapping into the Finn sheep genetics to shorten that tail. So there's some headway. But there's still new sheep breeds being developed, and it really takes a long time to establish. That being said, I rate the tailless sheep 5 radioactive barrels because that's how we get mutants. Or was that radioactive spider bites? Drop your lore below. So jumping into the sheep that inspired the research study behind the tailless sheep, let's talk about our next tail group, the fat-tailed sheep. The fat-tailed sheep are a type of sheep known for their rather robust tails, taking up about 25% of the global sheep population, mostly found in northern Africa, all the way to Central Asia and China. The fat-tailed sheep, as a group, have an exceptional adaptation to harsh environments. Just like with the camel's hump, these lumps not only give the sheep a battery of energy during hard times and harsh weather or extreme weather, but they provide a sustainable source of fats for local folks who really depend on these sheep for their livelihoods. There are 4 main subtypes: the short fat tail, long fat tail, fat rump, and long thin tail. Some breeds that you may have come across are the Caracual, Zetunis, and Awasi. But don't get it twisted. Twisted. I placed this fat-tailed sheep in its own group because it's so hard to find any information on. Twisted tails are specific to an ancient breed of sheep that's in danger of going extinct due to interbreeding with the imported sheep breeds. The Zulu sheep, another native African sheep breed from the traditional Zululand region, not only have fat tails, but they can even be curly. These sheep are known for having small mouse ears, some of which even look like La Manchas, but they're sheep. These style of ears are called swimmaladibabi. They're also known to thrive in really hot and humid environments and have a lot of parasite resistance. But there's no breed standard or even fan club. If you're from the deep south, or at least the region where I used to live, I think it's similar to where we have scrub goats or cracker sheep, where cracker sheep is both a name for a breed of sheep, but also is used as a name for a backyard sheep of unknown descent locally. So it can be confusing at times when there's local terms and standardized terms. I think that's what's happened with the Zulu sheep, where they're not really a breed, they're kind of just backyard sheep, but they're really adorable, and some of them have tails that are twisted, but it's not really a breed standard or a fan club per se. So to circle back to answer the question, why are there no tailless sheep? Okay, so often breeding sheep is a multi-generational project. It's a long, slow process, but currently on a global level, sheep fans have the means to make faster strides. There's some good contenders, but it's still quite a process nonetheless. And personally, I kind of like sheep tails. They're pretty adorable, but that's my subjective view. There's so much variety, but I understand why people may want to or need to dock, or find some sheep tails prettier than others. That's okay. It's okay to have preferences, and sometimes to sell sheep breeds, docking is a requirement. What's the norm has changed so much over the years, and working with our changing climate, both politically, socially, and environmentally, is something you may end up facing as you travel along in your sheepy endeavors, whether you run a commercial or personal operation. But hopefully I brought some fun into it and maybe inspired you to check out some more breeds of sheep. And so if you made it this far, leave me a firecracker emoji in celebration of our new year, new you, and here's an extra special thank you. I appreciate you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon where we explore a sheep-focused lifestyle every week. Until next time, ta-tas.